Hello, everyone. It is a pleasure to be speaking to you from Suman Bay and also participants from Sersan City. My name is Roy Ariel I work for the Global Sustainable Tourism Council, but today I will speak with you about ecotourism in Taiwan. A little bit of background about myself. Although I'm speaking to you at the moment from Taipei in Taiwan, originally I was born on Mount Carmel in Israel, where I spent most of my life, but have been living in Taiwan since 2014. From 2016, I work as the GSTC General Manager. And prior to that, parallel to that, I also conducted the research of community-based tourism of the Atayal people here in Taiwan. In 2015, I was with the Pacific Asia Travel Association as a sustainability associate. Prior to that, I was also working on other aspects of sustainability and ecotourism, both in Israel and in China, working with an ecotourism tour company. So in this presentation, where I will talk with you and give you examples about ecotourism in Taiwan, starting with an overview of the situation and important regulations here in Taiwan, and then 3 examples. The first one will be about an Atayal village called Smangus, which is an example of a community-based tourism where ecotourism activities are prominent. The second one will be about Hillmont Tours, an ecotourism tour operator that during COVID became more focused on ecotourism activities in Taiwan rather than taking Taiwanese abroad. And the third would be an initiative a volunteer initiative by an NGO called Bus Taiwan. So a few comments about Taiwan. Hopefully you have had the chance to visit Taiwan, and if not, then when the situation allows, I do hope that you will be able to visit. Taiwan has 65% of its surface covered by mountains in the central region, with 9 national parks and 13 national scenic areas that are all dedicated to preserve the flora, fauna, and diversity of the natural resources. But also around the city and towns, it is very easy to see endemic species and very, very well preserved flora and fauna. Around 650, it says in Korean, it says 450, but the accurate number is more 650 species of birds reside or migrate through Taiwan, and around 400 kinds of butterflies, including 50 endemic species, can be found on Taiwan main island, which is what most of you know, and also the offshore islands. Some of them are closer to mainland China. For example, these mountains that you see here is in the area of Alishan, famous for Korean visitors that come to Taiwan for more than a few days. Then many of them go and visit Alishan, famous for its beautiful scenery, but also for its really good tea plantations and tea cultivation in the area of high Alishan tea, usually oolong or tie guanin. Other natural examples would be the purple butterflies that can be found in southern Taiwan in one specific valley, that these migratory butterflies come also from the northern islands of the Philippines and also from Okinawa in Japan. Or many birds, as we spoke about, 650, and this is the Taiwan barbet, that if I will go out of my house to the nearby park, most likely I will hear it chippering and flying around. But Taiwan is also culturally diverse island. In that aspect, they are keen to promote it. It consists of Han people, Hakka people, Southeast Asian migrants that came over the past few decades, and of course, the 16 indigenous peoples of Taiwan that have been residing on the island for thousands of years. These different cultures also bring religious diversity that influence food and culture, There are many vegetarian and organic restaurants that are easy to find. So all of this to say that Taiwan has what needs for ecotourism activities. And here are just a few quick examples. On the left, you can see myself with some friends of Tsou people that live in the area of Alishan, Ali Mountain. On the right, you can see an Amis elder on the east coast of Taiwan, pointing actually at that point where he is actually speaking about historically where the Dutch first came and landed on Taiwan and their interaction with the Amis. Of course, wasn't so positive. On the left, you can see an example of one of the more famous temples in Taipei, Longshan Temple, full of mix of food and culture. And on the right, one of the city gods of Taipei celebration there. Of course, there are many churches. There are also other communities here, so quite diverse. Now, when we speak about ecotourism in Taiwan, the Chinese term for ecotourism, 生态旅游, is many times being confused or referred to for other types of tourism activities that are more nature tourism. So as when we speak about ecotourism, we usually also refer to the aspect of the interaction of the guest with the environment, and also the importance of the local community and what happens with the money that the tourist pays and so forth. So many times when we speak in Taiwan about ecotourism, these terms are sometimes mixed, and it's just important to note that. So here are key developments for the past 20 years in Taiwan from the government perspective. In 2001 was the first national tourism plan that had some ecotourism-like activities development. It didn't clearly say ecotourism, but it referred to activities referring to the ecological perspective of it that actually are ecotourism. Later on, there were amendments to increase the setting of natural, cultural, and ecological landscape areas and professional guides. Meaning, how do professional guides in Taiwan that have a certificate of licensed guide, what knowledge they need to have, and so forth. In 2002, during the International Year of Ecotourism, the Executive Yuan declared it as a Taiwan Ecotourism Year, and officially the industry officially covered the field of ecotourism. The next year, it saw the first edition of a white paper conducted by the government on ecotourism. And in 2010, which is very important, the Taiwan Environment Education Act has taken to a next step the demand and the requirements for professional guides. This means that now guides in Taiwan that are involved in ecotourism must have certain knowledge and must have certain skills about how they guide and who they guide. These guidelines, the act, and how to apply it is something that guides need to join different trainings and continue to improve their knowledge and skills and interpretation of the natural and social environment. In 2017, just a few years ago, Taiwan launched a year of ecotourism year and announced selected ecotourism itineraries that it promoted to encourage the public to immerse themselves in the landscape and environment. So these routes were mostly shared, that if one comes to Taiwan for a few days, they can do this and that. Or for Taiwanese that travel domestically to visit those certain places. You can see on the left, by the way, if you look here, you can see, you can recognize some of the aspects. So a lot focus on environment. You can see the sea turtles that can be seen, migratory birds, predators. On the northeast coast, whales and dolphins can be seen. There is also a whole activity around whale watching in the east coast of Taiwan. And of course, in the middle, the fireflies that now begin the season of the fireflies. And I can't wait for probably a few more days when the weather will be better here in Taipei. a mountain just behind my house is one of the best spots to go watch fireflies. And a spot to watch fireflies means we have thousands of them, where it's also being protected, and any light in the area is being covered to be red light to make sure that it doesn't interfere with the demand for darkness by the fireflies. Now let's look a little bit from the perspective of what tourists look at when they come to Taiwan, international tourists. In 2019, the top 10 reasons why inbound visitors come to Taiwan for sightseeing, meaning those that don't come for business travel, you can see that scenery is the second most important part, and also Taiwan's custom and culture. Ranking of activities of inbound visitors, we can see also that ecotourism is number 6. Of course, you can see it's not as high as historical relic sightseeing, night markets, and shopping, but it is very high, and it's more than other aspects of types of tourism activities. When we look at domestic travel, we also see that the national scenery and the cultural experience play the biggest role for domestic travel. So again, there is a whole potential and quite a lot of participation with ecotourism, but sometimes that ecotourism activities are referred to as ecotourism, but actually are nature-based tourism. Now we are speaking in 2021. Of course, we have to speak about the situation with COVID that changed the whole situation of what we know about tourism and tourist activities. And you probably know that Taiwan is considered one of the countries that handle the situation very, very well. It provided a very early and fast response with professional and open management, trust and collaboration of the society. So I remember that at the end of 2019, when still the COVID-19 was not being announced as a pandemic, Taiwan already identified that there are issues of possible pandemic starting in Wuhan, and all flights have been monitored, and people needed to go through some examination coming from that place, and quickly they stopped flights to and from Wuhan. This all allowed the early and fast response, and of course a very professional management of the situation, allowed to keep the situation that nowadays, I checked just a few days ago, 1,045 people have contracted COVID in Taiwan, but the majority of them are actually, they didn't contact it here, but actually came to Taiwan and they were already with COVID, but coming from abroad, and only counts of 10 deaths for the past year and a half. So there was very strong closure of borders that allowed it, but it meant no incoming international tourists at all. Visitors in Taiwan can extend their visas. So I personally have a few friends that came here on a visitor visa, but since then there have been some problems, and they were able to issue and renew their visas to stay here on a tourist visa. And of course, these tourists continues to spend money within the country and consume services of both the travel industry and other type of industries. So there were some restrictions on movement, on behavior in the public made in early 2020, but since then, because of the situation of the pandemic, it's been so well controlled. Now, when I go outside into the street, I personally know that there is no one who has COVID around me. Of course, we still wear masks here in public, and we behave in a manner that will prevent any spread of potential virus, even though that we know that there isn't. But the point is not to say that, okay, it's really fun here in Taiwan. The point is to say that tourism could continue here in Taiwan, and Taiwanese, instead of going abroad, they traveled domestically. Now, so the Taiwan domestic tourism was actually very important and very strong in 2020, and it was much stronger, as one would assume, compared to previous years. This affected a few changes that those spots like Yelio here on the left, which is a very common place to visit if you come to Taipei for a few days, saw drops of visitors because most of the visitors were foreigners. But here we see on the right, a place a little bit more remote in central Taiwan, more people came there. So I was just looking at statistics before making this presentation to you, and it was really interesting to see that even though there are no international tourists at all, still there were a few destinations that the number of visitors in those spots was so high compared to a year before that it was just very interesting to see. So more domestic ecotourism, but then we also saw some cases of destinations here in Taiwan that experienced over-tourism, which was difficult to manage because they weren't prepared. It wasn't even a second-tier destination, a third-tier destination, all of a sudden became, had problems of over-tourism. So these are some aspects that have been in Taiwan from the perspective of tourism policies, or some changes over the past year or two because of COVID. And I like to share a few cases of pretty inspiring stories of ecotourism here in Taiwan. And we'll start with Smangus. So this is, as you can see, this is the main island of Taiwan. South of Taipei, there is Hsinchu County. And if you look at where that red line goes to, that area in the mountains is called Jianshi Township. Jianshi Township has a majority of Atayal people living there. Atayal people, as I mentioned, is one of the 16 recognized group of indigenous people in Taiwan. All over Taiwan, we're talking about a population of 92,000 people, according to statistics from January 2020. And that's the third largest group of indigenous people in Taiwan, after the Amis people and Taiwan people. A few more comments about Jianshi and that area. We are talking about an area, as I mentioned, quite high in the mountains, at an altitude between 800 meters to 1,600 meters. And traditionally, they subsisted from slash and burn agriculture and hunting. So still to this day, they continue to do hunting, but that hunting is more as act of a traditional behavior and traditional things, and not necessarily hunting for food. So for me, I'm not able to go and go hunting in that area, but for the indigenous people, they have some regulations that allow them to do hunting within their traditional territories, based, of course, on licenses and regulations and collaboration with the local government on that. So it's all very under control. And of course, they do it in a very sustainable manner. The population of Jianshi, that county, the township, sorry, is about 10,000 people, and the majority of the people are Atayal. So let's continue with a bit more information about Smangus. One of the reasons that I personally am very familiar with that place is that for my master's degree, I actually conducted the research on community-based tourism and benefit distribution in Smangus and in another village across that valley. Just for you to see, here are a few examples of, you can see at the bottom, you would see some of the locals that are answering the survey that I produced. So I'm quite familiar with that area, and it is very, very interesting and beautiful. Let's talk about the story and the history about Smangus, going from being known as the dark village to now being known as the village of God. Until 1979, one of the latest villages that were connected to electricity. Until 1979, no electricity was in the village, and therefore it was called the Dark Village. In 1991, the chief, well, let's say the head, one of the elders of the village, of the community, attended another peach festival in another Atayal village. Now, what does it mean, a peach festival? As you might assume, it's considered of the blooming of the peach trees. And he saw how tourism of tourists that come to visit that village can be a really good activity for Smangus as well. But they took their time in development of their tourism offering in the village. And a year later, they identified kind of the key attractions, kind of natural attractions. So they're not going to build now a new theme park. They're actually going to identify what's unique in that area that would attract tourists. And that's I will show you in a few moments what they identified and will explain. Those are mostly the grove, beautiful, well-preserved grove of Taiwanese Formosan Cypress, ancient trees that some of them date back more than 3,000 years. Some of them are more than 3,000 years old. And during the Japanese colonial time, as any colonial power, they saw Taiwan as also a source of raw resources, and that included, of course, wood. And these trees were perceived as very good quality of wood. So, of course, quite a lot of them were cut down. But with all due respect to what happened during the Japanese colonial time, later on, after the Chinese Civil War and the retreat of the KMT, the Nationalist Party, the Kuomintang, retreated to Taiwan, they also needed a lot of raw resources, and their cutting of trees, of prime forest and trees, was actually in a much larger scale than the Japanese. So when we speak nowadays in 2021, we can how Taiwan looks is of course very different than 1,000 years ago, but the amount of these huge, magnificent Formosan cypresses is much smaller than what it used to be. And therefore, there are a few groves, a few areas in the Taiwanese high mountain with a climate that allow them to grow where we can see them. One of the best spots to see it nowadays is in Smangus. And in 1992 was the first guest house that was built to cater for tourists. But tourists still didn't come until later on, because only in 95, it was connected to the outside world with a paved road. There is a restaurant that I sometimes go to here in Taipei. And I was chatting with the owner who was telling me how her husband was one of those people that went in the 90s to Smangus. They literally had to walk there for it's a whole track just to get to that village. Nowadays, of course, you can just take a car and go there. And in 1999 was the first discussion of the community, because as you can understand, since 95, more and more people started to come and visit the village. And in 99, the community came together, the villagers, to discuss what's going to be done, how they're going to manage it in, now we can use this term, a sustainable manner, but of course they use some traditional manners in the Atayal language. So they decided to first start by creating one kitchen, one shared kitchen for all visitors visiting the village. In that sense, they were able to provide better quality for the guests, but also to kind of manage so people can focus on other aspects of one, of course, continue with farming, but the other one is to improve their services that they provide to guests. And in 2001, a community collective was set up, meaning that they start to work together on how to manage the different guest houses that now have already been in place. They used the time in 2001 to 2004 to actually learn and decide on where they're going to take it, what they're going to do. And some of the things that they've done is, first they went to visit some of the Tso people that I showed you a picture at the beginning in the area of Alishan. They went there to learn of some of the successful cases and successful models of community-based tourism, and also learn from bad mistakes. They also went to Israel, my home country, which is always fun to speak with the elders that went there, and then they share stories about some of the places that, of course, I know very well. By the way, the village is Christian, and they went there with support of the Presbyterian Church. And one of the key reasons for them to go to Israel, besides a pilgrim to the Holy Land, was to learn about the Israeli model of kibbutz. I hope that you're familiar with it. If not, you can afterwards search and learn more about kibbutz. But in short, it is a communal, a socialist commune that usually has been in the past more focused on farming, but still continues to behave as a socio-economical unit that follows a more communal and sharing of both income and expenses, but within the capitalist system. So it's kind of integrated in that sense, and it's a very interesting model. So they learned that, and eventually what happened is that they build and slowly spend time speaking within the community, led by the elders. So in the Atayal society, one becomes elder not necessarily because of their age, or not. It doesn't go because one is an elder, therefore their son or their daughter would become an elder, but rather if you have your abilities, if you're engaged, if you're kind of this natural leader, you are able to join and eventually become one of the elders that kind of lead the village. So the whole discussion was led by them, and what they did is eventually create the Tenunan Smangus, which is a cooperative. So they followed a similar model of the kibbutz, combined with some traditional indigenous knowledge of the Atayal people and their laws called Gara, and combine it together to create this cooperative that nowadays work very well. Now, this village is called the Village of God because as you may imagine, they are a Christian village, and they are happy to show that they are Christians. And I will share with you a little bit comments on that in a minute. But it's such a successful case that they are living very well. They still live in a manner that is a traditional manner, meaning that they live according to ideals and ethics based on their traditional knowledge and ethics, but combined in a modern world. So many people, there are many researchers and stories and articles about this village. Write it here. We have about 180 people living in the village, and 85% of them are part of the cooperative. This means that when I or you, hopefully in the near future, when you come and visit Taiwan and you want to visit Smangus, you will contact the village rather than one specific guest house. You will contact the Tenunan and ask them, I want to make a booking, a reservation for accommodation. What do you have available? And this accommodation is managed by Tenunan, the community, the cooperative. And the person that answers the phone is going to get the similar amount of money to the person who will be cleaning your room, and to the elder that will speak to you on Saturday night at the church as part of their introduction presentation. So elders, women, young people, they all receive the same benefit, but of course it is different if you have children, or if you need to go to school, or if you want to go to university, or whatever. So, but the cooperative really supports all the community. As I mentioned, 85, because not all of the villagers want to participate, and that is fine. But even still that they don't participate, of course, there is a collaboration between the local people. So here are the ancient Formosan cypress grove. You can see here me on the left, not the same hairstyle that I have now. It's from the wind there, but you can see this is one of the smaller trees. There are a few much larger trees in that area, and they built a path, a very nice trail to get there. As you can see, with areas to sit down, and everything is managed by Smangus. So all this area, which is considered under their traditional territory, is managed by them. Here's an example also along the trail. You can see on the left, the newer toilet available. You can wash your hands, and you can use the toilet while looking to the right and look at the beautiful mountains. And they intentionally, by the way, it's glass, so it is covered if there is rain or whatever, but it's one of the nicest views that you can have from toilets that I've seen. As you can see on the right, the reception for cell phones is also quite well on that trail. That's during a regular weekend where you can see quite a lot of people using their phones. So this is the key natural attraction. The second part, which is of course important to ecotourism, is the cultural part. And this is what I mentioned about them showing to the world we are Christians, and in that sense, when they have the cultural presentation, it's being done especially on Saturday night at the church. So if you come on the weekend and attend this event, you will be able to perhaps hear some of the songs that they sing. They will wear the traditional clothes, and on the left you can see two of the elders explaining some of the words. They first teach you a little bit on how to say hello in Ataya language, and tell you a little bit about the story of where they came from in Taiwan and some historical perspectives. But it's really important because the interpretation is being done by themselves, and they have, of course, improved it over the years and learned. And now the way that they do their representation of culture to outsiders, I think is amazing, especially taking into consideration that it is an indigenous group. It is a minority. Sometimes there are, of course, like in any other society, there are stigmas and perceptions that may be correct or may not be correct by the majority. And in this way, where they communicate it, they show that, and of course it's being done in a church because it's part of their modern identity that they are Christians. So you can see really here a nice weaving between traditional and modern culture. And in that sense, it would be very authentic compared to perhaps other community-based tourism here in Taiwan, where they might adapt the activities to what the Han majority might expect from them, such as singing and dancing and some other typical activities that you can find. So that was kind of an example of how one community-based tourism project, not a project, a whole thing has been going on, and nowadays Smangus is so popular that one might need to book ahead a few months to to come and stay there for the night. They also have quota on how many people can come. They request people to coordinate ahead to make sure that not too many people are coming. And that's also to allow resting to the trails, to themselves as service givers, and so forth. I recently also, I think a few years ago, very recently, they also along the trail to the grove, they actually planted quite a lot of peach and other type of trees that would bloom around this time of the year. So another natural attraction for people to come and take photos and see there. Yes. Now let's move to the second example of Hillmon Tours. That's a tour operator that in the past mostly was taking Taiwanese groups of mostly those that like to go hiking and trekking, would take them abroad to Nepal, to Southeast Asia, to Europe, to Korea, and go for a trip that usually would combine during the day, go hiking, and more, not sometimes simple, sometimes more strenuous trails. And then you go and you stay in a good accommodation and you get good food and your guides are in good quality. So they aim a little bit higher. It's not for those that just look for the cheapest option. And they had in Taiwan some tours, but that wasn't to make money. That was only to promote themselves. So they would create some meetups and some trips. So people would learn and join them and see, wow, this is a great company, very nice guide. And through that, they would promote their trips abroad. However, during COVID time, all their focus changed, and they had no ability to send anyone abroad. That's it, right? Nobody can go abroad nowadays. So what they did is they started to develop similar trips, but domestically. So again, mostly focused on these trails. Tours are focused on hiking. Some tours include some visit to communities. I saw that, for example, there is a tour that goes to Smangus, and also the other village that I conducted research in. But they combine it. So you stay in a good accommodation, and then the next day you go on a nice hike with good guiding and good interpretation. And sometimes here in Taiwan, a lot of ecotourism activities of day trips or day activities are heavily on education. So you can find a lot of activities of, let's do a butterfly tour, let's do birding of only a few hours in one area, which might be similar to what you do in your location. And then it's very heavy on the educational part. So for this company, there is education, there is interpretation, but it's not the most focus is on that. It's part of it, but it's not the majority of it. Recently, they also began following the Travel Life for Tour Operator standard, meaning that they try to comply with international standards of being a sustainable tour operator. So we can see that there is some commitment from them to also follow and improve and taking the time to improve themselves. Now, in a sense, this is a tour operator that has been, because of their new products for domestic tourism, they managed to keep themselves financially sustainable. Here is an example of one tour. Just to give you an example, leave at 7:30 from Taipei and arrive they go to Hsinchu, the same county but in a different area. They go to Shitou, and you can see on the left, and then go to Beipu, which is an Hakka. People live there, so it's a traditional old street. And by the way, after my wife and I married, we went for our first honeymoon in that area as well, where there is beautiful nature and we can go hiking. And then at night, later on, go to a nice hotel, soak in hot spring, as you can see here. So it's kind of like this mix between good, nice national parks or other type of nature options, and then good accommodation, good quality things. Here on the second day, depart for a little bit longer trail. On the left, you can see this, it's in Chinese, but just to give you an example of how it looks on the website, where they give clear information on how the trail goes on day 1 and day 2 and so forth. And looking at the schedule they have for April, you can see that they have 9 trips of 2-day tours each one, which is quite a lot. If you think about it, it's just very, I'm very pleased to see that they managed to divert and change the way that they manage and the products that they offer during COVID. And who knows what will happen after Taiwanese can go and travel abroad. But at the moment, they are developing more trips and more trails and more nice activities here in Taiwan. The third example is Park Bus Taiwan. So a few comments about Park Bus. It's actually originally, it's from, it started by Park Bus. It's a project in Canada that Park Bus Taiwan is a pilot project of taking that same model of what has happened in Canada, that they operate bus services to national parks and national and other beautiful natural sceneries that sometimes are difficult to get to without private transportation. So let's say here in Taiwan, and as I remember from my visits in Korea, public transportation is very good, but sometimes it's a little bit difficult to get to certain points. If you are to take public transportation and you want to go just for, let's say, a day trip, you might need to spend half of the day just on the public transportation, and perhaps there's not even a bus that goes to this beautiful national park. So what they did is to start to offer just transportation. And in that sense, it allows city people that not necessarily have private transportation to be connected to some beautiful parks and other places to visit. So the person, there are actually 3 people involved in this project. One is a Canadian who is a lecturer for tourism here in Taiwan nowadays, who was involved with Park Bus in Canada and therefore brought it here to Taiwan. The other one is an American that has been living also here in Taiwan for many years, and he's an ecotour guide, and also I'm looking forward to join one of his night photography trips that he does during summertime here in Taiwan. That's one of my plans for the summer, to join him. He is a really good photographer of night wildlife here. And the third one is a Taiwanese person who is also has environmental education, and the 3 of them eventually began this here in Taiwan, sorry. So at the moment, the tours leave from Taipei, but later on, sometimes they do have tours leaving from other big cities in Taiwan, such as Taichung or Kaohsiung. And what it does, it connects city dwellers with nature, one of the best ones. So on the right, you can see the Matcha Mountains or Neidong area. So 2 different places where they take. So in a sense, that is something very nice, and they also are supportive. When one joins such a tour, it actually just takes you from the city to the park, and then takes you back from the park to the city, and you pay for the bus ticket. But that bus is just that bus on that specific day. You need to register ahead and so forth. And if you have financial problems, or it's for some educational perspective, then of course they might be able to support you. coordinated, it's seeking to create greater access, and it's also very family friendly. But recently they started to collaborate with another new initiative that started during COVID time, and that's TPH Ecotourism, of a few ecotourism and environmental enthusiastic that began offering these tours that or activities aimed for kind of teenagers and younger generation, so people between the 20s to the 40s, and of course people older than that are welcome to join, but that's kind of their focus. Everyone is invited, but the focus of the activity is not for children, or it's not this 100% heavy on the education, but kind of collaborate with others on these short activities to learn about the nature in Taiwan. So it's this weekend that they are going to Xito, beautiful area here in central Taiwan, to offer this bilingual nature experience. So when they will do the guiding, it will be both in Chinese, in Mandarin, and in English. So again, it's very accessible for both people, both Taiwanese and foreigners that live here and are able to join it. Their guides are trained in botanical and wildlife observation, and that's a really nice thing that now Park Bus is doing. So I hope I managed to convey a sense of this ecotourism situation here in Taiwan. And of course, we can go on for hours of speaking about different examples here, but I intentionally chose 3 different examples of 3 different cases that are very different from each other. And I hope that you are able to enjoy it and able to learn something. Of course, come and visit and participate in these activities when you are here in Taiwan, or if you have questions, you can also contact Mihi and she can connect you with myself if needed. And perhaps it will bring you some ideas or thoughts on how you can do things better at where you are, which of course you already probably do well, but perhaps you will have some nice ideas for the future. Thank you very much.